Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader. Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. It's David Horsager. I have a special guest with today. She is the CEO of the Gasby Group. She's a product of Harvard University's Kennedy School, and she's done research at the renowned Media Lab at MIT. Some have called her the philanthropic guru and the nonprofit mythbuster. She is an author, she's an artist, and she's a friend. So right off the bat, I'll say we serve on a university board together, and we've become friends, and I admire her wisdom, and I just plain like her. So thank you for being on the show today, M. Gasby Brown.
Oh, David, thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I liked everything you said, by the way. And it has been just a joy for us to get to know one another and become friends. So thank you for having me here today.
Well, thank you. Let's start with just a little background and what you've been most passionate about these days.
Well, these days, I'm very interested in a number of things. One, the whole space of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. The whole space of getting to know oneself in this sort of post-pandemic, but not post-pandemic era in which we were forced to confront who we are, who we want to be. So I have a keen interest in that introspection that has caused. And I'm very, very interested in philanthropy and the nonprofit space and what's going on in the world. I really love humankind, and I have a heart for it.
We're going to jump into several of these things and what you see as far as leaders. In fact, I think there's some interesting things with nonprofits we want to get to. Actually, we'll jump there now. We'll come back to personal in a moment. What do you think? You said something that I thought was interesting. I want to hear, our listeners to hear, why you think nonprofits are so important in the U.S. economy and in our world.
Well, there are three sectors that drive the United States: the government, business, and the nonprofit sector, which is responsible for trillions of dollars that contribute to our gross national and domestic product. And I think people underestimate that. On top of that, the nonprofit world and the sector can accomplish things that government cannot because of its bureaucratic nature. It can accomplish things that businesses are not necessarily interested in making that their primary source of focus. They are in business to make money and to make profits and to be profitable for shareholders. So the nonprofit sector represents an opportunity to serve the least of these. And that's one of the reasons why I believe it's so important, because when there is a good mission for a nonprofit, there is nothing comparable to it.
So when you say think, I'm going to hold up one of your books too, because I've been Business of a Spiritual Matter: What All Leaders of Faith-Based Nonprofits Should Know. Can you give us the top idea? Share a bit about this piece that you've created so well.
Well, nonprofits are businesses, even though it's a nonprofit. Nonprofit does not mean no profit. And there are similarities in the way corporations and businesses are formed and how they operate and how nonprofits operate. But too often, nonprofits get so bogged down in its mission until some of the infrastructure that's needed for it to sustain itself, it gets lost. And so acting like a business, making sure that there are strategies, a strategic plan, with which they are following, making sure that they know their donors. While corporations know, and those in the consumer service industry, they know their customers. Nonprofits need to know their donors. It needs to be donor-centered. Who are they? Who's giving to you and why? And so there's so many similarities along those lines. Fiscal responsibility, boards, Why are they important for both nonprofits and for corporations? And what is the difference between them? And there's little difference other than corporate board members get paid and nonprofit board members don't.
You and I don't.
No, we don't.
On our nonprofit work.
We're looking to do something about that, right, David?
So I think this is interesting because, I'm thinking it was over 20 years ago, Lisa and I were asked to be on our first board. It was for a nonprofit. They were very missional in nature, doing this great work in orphanages around the world. They were a young nonprofit. And I still remember they would come back from this work overseas to some of the poorest places in the world. We believed in their mission, and yet every time we'd bring up strategy, finances, funding this, they'd say, oh no, it'll just work out. And in 2 years, they were nowhere to be found, not doing anything missional because they would not, in essence, as you say, think like a business. Yeah. What do you think if we're, listening today, we have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of moms and dads that are leaders. We have a lot of executives, CHROs, CEOs, and so on. And we have a lot of nonprofit leaders. But what would you say to a nonprofit leader or a business leader? You think this is a key to think about how we could work together better in the future, nonprofits and business?
Well, an old mother in a church that I attended said, if you call yourself a leader and no one is following, then you're just taking a walk. I like that. And I think John Maxwell picked it up later and others have quoted it. Who knows where it came from, but it's a worthy quote. And with business leaders, they need to be involved with nonprofits and philanthropy. That is one of the signs of a civic and business leader, to be able to lead in that regard while leading the business that they are in. So, and historically, we have seen that with the Rockefellers, the Carnegies in this country, and others who have led the way as philanthropists. And then it is for the nonprofit leader to be in the position to be trusted. That's why I like what you do so much. To be that trusted leader in which people can say, we believe that our money, our treasure, our time is being invested in the right way and invested wisely.
Let's jump to personal for a minute, because you have advised and served on many of the most significant boards, even in our country, and you advised leaders and presidents. And so, but let's jump to you and I personally. What I found, at least, is people that I admire as leaders, well, you might say on stage, lead themselves quite well off stage. Imperfect as we are, what are some things, do you have habits or routines that you do to lead yourself well? Because you're so asked to be an advisor to others. What do you do daily to lead yourself well?
It is so fundamental for me. First of all, I get up early. I'm a morning person. I get up at 6 a.m. And the other thing that I do, and I heard a general talk about this, and I've been practicing it, a general in the Army, I make up my bed, which gives finality and an initiation of this day is really starting. Then the other thing is to have devotions. I use a scriptural devotion in the mornings to help guide me and center me for the rest of the day. And then do a to-do list. And I'm checking off those things that take place and that need to take place, that are nice to take place, and those things that I can do tomorrow. So it really does help to prioritize what needs to be done. And I find that those habits have centered me in a way that I'm focused. And with so many obvious distractions in the world with emails and IG and all of that, I tend not to go down rabbit holes as much. And I think that is focus, laser-like focus on what needs to be done is the linchpin for any leader.
Well, I got to get, and we're going to get back to other kinds of leadership here in our time together. But I also think that when I hear about great leaders that are working hard, they're feeling the weight of board work and other things, they often have something else they do, something, a hobby, a release, and this kind of thing. And I just have to hold up something from my dear friend Gasby. For those that are watching this on YouTube, you'll have to watch it. For the rest of you on podcasts, you're not going to see this, but this is an amazing, beautiful painting that is painted by none other than M. Gasby Brown. I'm assuming some of those paintings behind you also are your work of art. Tell us how you got into art, because it's kind of a leadership story. You're self-taught, but tell us about what that means to you and how you started and kind of what it means to your whole life now.
Yes. Well, all of these pieces behind me, I have created. And around 2002, I was having these dreams and visions, David. They were so pervasive until they never left me. When I was awake, I would think about it. Driving along, think about these visions of painting trees and other objects. And finally, I just woke up one morning in 2002 and announced to my husband that I was going to start painting. So I just started to paint. I had never painted in my life before. And so I went to the arts and crafts store and got paints and brushes and canvas and began my journey. Some people laughed at me because they know me to be in this philanthropic and nonprofit space. And others were my cheerleaders who said, do it. Why not? And one in particular said, hang up all your art around your house. And I did, whether it was worthy or not, because I was doing it to be cathartic. I just couldn't continue to live with what was in my heart and my head. So with that, after hanging them around, and my husband and I entertained a lot at that time, people started coming by, and then they began to ask, Gasby, how can we get a piece of your art? I want to buy a piece of your art. Excuse me. It's making me cough as I speak because it was so incredible for anyone wanting to buy the art that I created. And so my husband, who's a great marketing guru, said, we're going to have a show. And we did have my first art show in the foyer of the Jefferson Hotel on 16th and M in Washington, D.C., and sold over 30 pieces of my art. I didn't know what I didn't know, so I didn't even know that was good until I began to kind of navigate around with a few artists, and they said, oh, we're really very fortunate. We sell 2 to 3 pieces at a show. And so I felt extremely blessed by that and continued on the journey. And now I have about 400 of my pieces owned by people across the country, in the Caribbean and in Canada. And it's just been a journey of exhibitions that I would never have thought, people commissioning me to do pieces. Who would, in my wildest dreams, would never have thought something like that could happen. So it was a God journey.
Well, they are beautiful, and our team just loves it. We've gone back and forth with this one between my wife wanting it at home and the team wanting it here at the offices. And right now it's here again because I use it to talk about some things that I just love it. So thank you for this piece, and we look forward to more.
Well, thank you for enjoying it, because without people like you enjoying it, I would just be creating stuff in a vacuum. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh. Let's jump to DE&I. It's a big topic, DEI and justice, some say in belonging these days, but diversity, equity, inclusion. We talk about trust, and you can't. It seems like you can't have the best kind. At least there was a study on diversity, massive Harvard Putnam study that showed kind of diversity of many kinds on its own tends to pit people against each other unless you increase trust. So we're all about how do we increase trust to get the best of that. We know there is greatness in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice. So how do we increase trust so that we enjoy the best of this beautiful array of diversity? But I'd like to talk to you. How do you tackle DE&I in a way, or how can we as leaders maybe even think differently about it so that we increase trust and get the best of diversity?
Boy, that's a great question, David. And the onus is really more on the learnee than the learned, in this case, in my mind. And so it really comes down to, and I will deal with the racial part of it because there's so many moving parts to DEI and justice. There needs to be racial literacy, a curiosity that to learn, an openness to learn and to be a lifelong learner about the various historical issues that have led us to where we are now with regard to racial equity. There needs to also be, in my mind, I kind of deal with 3 R's and C's and what have you, but another R would be racial humility. There are some people who feel that they have read a few books and they have watched a couple of movies and documentaries, and now they know all they need to know, and they maybe attended a couple of DEI trainings, and they feel that they know all there is to know about racial reckoning and what's going on. But that is the wrong attitude. The attitude has to be humility, where you're putting yourselves in the position to always be open to learning new things and more. And then the racial sustainability, that you're in this for the long haul. This is not just a flashpoint in history, but this is an opportunity to make change. And it starts with each of us.
Hey, it's Ann with the Trust Edge team here. As you know, we are passionate about helping you and your team perform at your best. And that's why David wrote his new book, Trusted Leader. This true-to-life parable follows the story of a CEO who uncovers the root issue threatening his organization's success. And in the back half of the book, David provides a roadmap for even how to solve those root issues. Get Trusted Leader for your team, your organization, or even just for yourself at trustedleaderbook.com.
Where are some places you see people doing these things well? Like, furthering racial equity in a where is it working? Is there places you can shine that are examples for leaders to look at and say, okay, I never thought of that. I think I could, not just could I learn something here, but this gives me something tangible we could start to do in our environment.
Mm-hmm. I think the NBA has done a great job in this regard and worthy of studying their model of how they're dealing with justice, equity, and inclusion. It's so interesting because everybody's tall there in the NBA. And one of the big optics that we use a lot would be everybody looking over a fence at different heights. And not everybody can see over the fence because of their height. And that's where the justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion comes in, because the more you adjust the height, the more everyone is in the position to see. But true equity is when you remove the fence altogether and everybody can see where they are. And I think that's where we talk about that belonging part that you mentioned. Right.
How are they doing that? How is the NBA doing? I know I've met the CEO of the NBA, and certainly many of the. I'm on a High Point expert in residence with the amazing CEO of the Mavericks, and she is an amazing positive force in this work. But what do you see them doing?
Well, I see them utilizing, first of all, their stadiums. With the health disparities during the pandemic, and the stadiums were not being used anyway. What foresight and what thought, what great insight I think they utilized. And being able to say, we're going to take these stadiums and we're going to try and close the disparity, the health disparity amongst minorities with who were getting vaccinated or tested or all of the things that were a part of that. These are the real things. It's not in the thinking about it, it's in the doing. So when I saw them pivot along those lines, that would be something that I would consider an example. And I'd love to hear from you, David, about the qualities that you've seen in those people that probably helped to lead them to a point where they would think this way.
Well, I think the number one, you said curiosity here, I think was the onus is on the learner, either any way you look at it. But the great leaders I've seen deal with this and almost anything well have had a humility. I would say humility of understanding we don't know it all, a humility of that leads to, I guess you said it. Yeah. Number 2 was racial humility. Yeah, it was that exactly. I thought you'd said something before. So it's just plain humility. And that leads to racial humility. It leads to kind of gender humility. It leads to a lot, but the thing that I've seen work is a start with humility. And go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but it just brought a thought up about I've seen so many CEOs and as I've navigated around in my professional career. And I see the ones who are most effective are those who walk in the room and begin to want to meet other people, not the ones who want everybody to flock to them and pander to them, if you will, because they have power and authority, but the ones that just walk up to people and say, "Hi, I'm Jane Doe," or "I'm John Doe," and ask their name and then be interested in other people. I find being interested in other people being very important. That's an aside, but it was just a thought that came to my head that I found as a common thread that CEOs who are most effective have that sense of humility and have the confidence that they can walk in a room and get to know people rather than being the center of attention.
It's almost I think I like what you said. It's a healthy confidence that you don't need. Like, these needy, if you're a CEO that needs the limelight, or you need this, or you need to be right. I just talked to a very good friend of mine, Phil Sterling, brilliant gentleman, but he said, I no longer. He said his whole life is now, like, in these older years, like, I want to be curious about how to solve the right problems. I no longer want to be right, or something like that. His quote was much better, and he's so wise. But I think, this idea of curiosity about others, care for others, interest in others. I think all that goes together. There's a whole lot more we could say about this. Are there structural things that you've seen that are working, or you would recommend? I think, people, I'm on some boards where there's metrics. We are. Here's one idea that in one company they changed the equity equation by saying you can hire the best person for any job, who you feel like is best for that job. But there has to be a top 3, and one of those 3 has to be a person of color. And it actually, interestingly enough, I could see white folks possibly saying, well, that isn't, why do you need to do that? Or, you could see certain things being said, and yet that just put certain people in the room. It forced certain people to be in the room that actually, from that group of 3, then the number that were hired as best of, many more of color, and the health of the company and the output of the company went up. So they found a way to get the right people in the room without saying, you have to hire 50% of this or that. And I think it was one simple idea. I guess I'm just asking your perspective on that. And are there other ideas that maybe we should be thinking about that can help, start to solve this problem in our own spaces?
Well, a couple of things. There is a name for that procedure, and it's called the Rooney Rule, where the 3 finalists are captured. One of the things I really bristle when someone says we're trying to find, when you're talking about those three, we're trying to find qualified Black people or minorities. Well, they wouldn't be qualified. They have to be qualified to be one of the three. So what are you talking about? So eliminating that kind of lexicon is very important. I think it's also very crucial for the diversity, equity, and inclusion person to report directly to the CEO and president, that this is not someone down the line that reports to the HR person, but has the importance of being on the cabinet, if you will. And then also it's very important, especially for corporations, for that executive committee to be able to receive the frontline training and the hard-nosed training of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And therefore, it trickles down from the top. If you start with the employees at a ground level, that is not the place to start. The entry level has to be at the top. And I'd also encourage white CEOs to seek training from experienced white DEI people who have walked in their shoes, understand some of their discomforts and challenges, and it can be talked about in a very frank manner. So those would be a few of the things that I would recommend right off the bat.
Yeah, those are good ones. Very good. Well, let's jump into you again for a moment. What are you learning now? You're a continual learner. What are you thinking about these days that's hitting you and you're, a lot of people, I've learned this on podcasts. A lot of people ask, well, what did you learn back then from that thing? And I'm that's interesting. I don't mind that, but I kind of want to hear what you're learning right now.
Well, I've read a little bit of Adam Grant's book about Think Again, and I am trying to do that. How wrong or how right can I be? And challenging that so that I am not this myopic person that it has to be my way. And I've gone that journey, and I don't want to be in that space. So that's what I'm learning about me and how I want to be as a person. Then I'm reading a couple of books that I'm learning about people, cultures, and relating to others. I'm reading Just As I Am, the autobiography of for Cicely Tyson. I just relate to so much of what she has written about, and she was such a woman of faith, which I didn't know how deeply her faith was rooted, and just her various experiences that are just really phenomenal. That led her to be able to do this and release the book at 96 years old and look amazing. I want to be amazing looking like her. And then I'm reading a book now by Chimamanda Adichie. It's called Half of the Yellow Sun, and it is about the Biafran War and what led to it. And it has given me great insight into the Nigerian culture. So learning about others has been very, very important. I also read a book recently about the Topeka School. That's the name of the book, which is really, really great. And learning about the thinking of Midwest people, and particularly white males in the Midwest, because it's written by a guy who's coming from his perspective. So I think just my curiosity has even heightened. I've always had a curiosity about others, not being nosy, but just being curious. And I think it's been heightened, David.
Hey, it's Sam from the Trust Edge team. Most training and development initiatives don't last or even solve the root issue hindering your organization. That's where Trust Edge coaching certification comes in. Trust Edge coaches are equipped with a suite of tools to identify, benchmark, and close gaps in trust for good. Because when you solve the real issue, you get measurable results in a culture where people actually want to make an impact. So whether you're a coach with your own clients or a leader training people inside your organization, check out trustedgecoaching.com and see how you can start solving the root issue and get lasting results in your business. And now back to the show.
What's motivating you these days? You keep doing all this great work, both in nonprofits, and we get to serve together in a university board as well. But what kind of keeps you going in your work?
I have found my purpose. And And
how'd you find it?
I wish I could tell you, but I did. I think maybe COVID contributed to it because there was a lot of time to think and introspect. But right here in this moment, I am so clear that my purpose is to serve and to utilize my experiences and that I've been blessed with, good and bad, with others so that there may be a benefit. And that includes the art as well. There is purpose there to express and share with others. So I have the purpose-driven life.
I love it. Speaking of motivation, and I don't always ask this one, but if you're trying to motivate someone else to do something, let's take a board or a leader or someone else needs to change that you're dealing with. And many people think, well, motivation is just intrinsic. So whatever you want to call it, if you want to inspire them to do something, but you need to move someone to think differently or do something else. How do you motivate them?
First, by finding out where they are, because I believe we have to meet people where they are. So to come with a formulaic approach, I'm going to teach you this, and this is what you need to know, in my mind, is not the most effective approach. The most effective approach is to find out where people are. So, for example, on a board that probably has an uneven pattern of understanding of a certain topic. First of all, do a little survey of how they feel about certain things. And to get that in its aggregate and to have small group discussions so that you can have an understanding and they can have an understanding of each other, put things candidly on the table about it and discuss it in a transparent manner. Moving from a base of knowledge about your audience is always very, very important instead of coming in with your own agenda that is just one way.
Building on that would certainly be a huge part of it. Thank you for that. How would you go into a board, let's take a new board, and build trust? How would you build it? You build it, but how would you build it amongst each other?
Well, through small group interaction, first of all. I facilitate a lot of board retreats and doing the kinds of things that help people to get to know one another. I ask them about what is something on your resume that no one else knows that you don't put on your resume? In other words, what is something about you that you don't put on your resume? And people come up with some of the most fascinating answers that then connect. It's almost like St. Francis of Assisi. Oh, I didn't know you felt that way. We have something in common. And that getting to know you and getting to know others is a very important part of trust. The fact that there is, for people to be on a board, if it's operated in the right way, that you're all there because you're offering something good. But to get to know the people that you are navigating with on a deeper level is, I think, very important. And that helps to build the trust, to know that you think I'm okay because I climb hills and I do mountain climbing because you do that too.
Right.
And I just went on I don't do this, but for a person to say, I just went on a 26-mile hike. And the person is, I did the same thing 2 years ago, and begin to have that kind of interaction and speaking in a trustful way. I think about, there's a U.S. trust, which Bank of America and Lilly Family School of Philanthropy longitudinal study that's done every 2 years for high net worth individuals. And one of the things that they have indicated in this study is that they trust nonprofits to do the work that they cannot do themselves individually. Isn't that a wonderful entry point? That speaks to relationship. And I think the bottom line of all that I just said, it was a long-winded way of saying it, relationship is so important when building trust.
Everything of value is built on trust. We do a process that I am proud of, and it's had significant results in boards and organizations, but it's something we call the Trust Shield. And it basically is a process that helps people build connection and kind of see some of the things you talked about, like, I've had people with totally diverse views, a board that were just not working together at all. And one, they felt safe enough to say, well, I'm a Muslim, well, I'm a Christian, well, I'm a this, well, I'm a that. And at the end of it, they all saw each other as human, and they worked together in a whole new way. It's a powerful piece. And
yes, indeed. And
yeah.
In fact, my book, as you mentioned before, Business of a Spiritual Matter, was written for that interrelationship between the Abrahamic faiths. And so it's very much tied to what we have in common.
It's a great book. Give people a quick overview of what they would get out of it. This is Business as a Spiritual Matter. And just give a quick overview, Gasby.
Well, it's going to tell you about strategic planning from A to Z, and it will give leaders all of the foundations as of a year ago that give to various nonprofit organizations. It's going to test leaders on few are chosen. Many are called, but few are chosen. Are you chosen to be a leader and to really stretch yourself to think about what a chosen leader means, how to build a board? There's an author that I like. His name is Arthur Franzreb. He's passed away now. He wrote a book called Not on This Board, You Don't. And the dysfunctions of boards is something that I'm dealing with all the time. Clients are asking me to weigh in. And so in this book, it gives all the right tools to build a board, to deal in self evaluation, how to evaluate board members, how to retain board members, and just from A to Z, what it's going to take, how to conduct a capital campaign. There's a chapter in the book for Christian schools in particular that says the bake sale will never be enough. So how to conduct an annual giving campaign, all of these kinds of things that sustain a nonprofit with the right tools is part of the business of a spiritual matter.
So what about you? You've written several books. Your painting is touching lives. Your leadership work and nonprofit work is touching lives. What's a hope for the future for you? Maybe it's bucket list. Maybe it's just what the hope for the future?
Well, I hope that we will have come together closer as human beings across the board. My heart is so heavy with the division that I see and the meanness and the evilness that has surfaced itself. And so my hope is when I know people like you, David, and so many others, not just white people, but people of every ethnicity who are so interested and eager to make things better. That's my hope.
Do you have one tip on how we might start?
Well, I have three tips if you'll allow me. One is awareness. What really took place? This gets back to the racial literacy. The other one is relationship. When a head of an organization who is white says we're going to become more diverse, I want to know what their wheelhouse of relationships. What does that look like? Do you live in an integrated community? Do you have friends that are of different ethnicities? Do you make it a point to have vendors who are diverse? Do you make it a point to make sure that if it's appropriate, any algorithms within your company are tested and metrics are tested by diversity, equity, and inclusion? But I do want to know about that person's life and lifestyle, how they navigate when they're not in the workplace with people who are others, if you will. And then the other thing is commitment. Are you really committed to looking at, in all of us, unconscious dominance and stereotyping and the kinds of things that we have somehow, in some cases, been trained to think about? Can we untrain ourselves and be committed to do something different? And so those are the three things: awareness, those pillars. I think we can built upon awareness, relationship, and commitment.
Yep. If we're going to build trust, we need to be thinking about them for sure.
Yes.
There is a whole lot here in a very short time. I've got one more question for you because it is the Trusted Leader Show. But before we get into that, where can people find out more about M. Gasby Brown?
Oh, yes. Well, there are a couple of places. Please go to www.thegasbygroup.com. You can learn all about what we do in the nonprofit space and philanthropy. And then my art is www.nopermissionneeded.com.
And we'll put both of those spelled out links directly there in the show notes. But
yes, you notice I said www.
Yeah.
That comes from my broadcast training. I was a reporter for Fox Television at one time and also for BET. So it was so important to articulate.
You're very good at articulating. Well, it's the last question. It's a Trusted Leader Show. Who is a leader you trust and why?
I had the great pleasure of working with and under the president and CEO of the National Urban League, Hugh Price, who in my mind was the epitome of a great leader. Here was a man who had come from being a New York Times editorial writer and also a vice president at the Rockefeller Foundation, and was tapped to be the president and CEO of the National Urban League. And many people they saw that background, but they didn't know his passion for equity that he had been involved in all of his life. And he mentored me and encouraged me. And I think he is most responsible, other than my parents, for my growth and development as a professional. He held on to his integrity, and he was just he was a consensus builder, and he also was a very kind person.
Fantastic. Well, we could talk for hours. I'm glad I get to speak to you again before long. But thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, Gasby, and thank you all for listening. This has been the Trusted Leader Show. Until next time, stay trusted.